On January 25, 2006, officials in North London arrived at a small flat in Wood Green. They were there to repossess the property after months of unpaid rent. The flat seemed quiet, sealed, untouched, but once the door was forced open, the silence revealed something disturbing. Inside, the television was still on. The faint blue glow flickered against the walls, a reminder of a life once present. On the floor, an opened Christmas present sat neatly stacked, waiting for someone who would never open them. The sink held unwashed dishes, and letters and bills had piled up behind the door. On the sofa, what remained of a woman lay motionless, reduced to bones. Her name was Joyce Vincent. She had been dead for nearly 3 years, and in that entire time, no one had noticed. The discovery shocked Britain and the wider world. How could someone die in one of the busiest cities on earth and remain invisible for so long? Newspapers rushed to print the strange details, and the public tried to process how such a tragedy could unfold in plain sight. Yet beyond the headlines, the question remained: who was Joyce, and how did her life lead to such an ending? Joyce was born in West London in 1965 to a working-class Caribbean family. Her childhood was not wealthy, but it was filled with ambition. She grew up bright, polite, and determined to build something greater for herself. Those who knew her described her as elegant, attractive, and disciplined, a young woman who wanted to carve out a life that matched her dreams. As she entered adulthood, she began working hard to make that life real. In her 20s, Joyce landed a job at Ernst & Young, one of the world's largest accounting firms. She worked in the Treasury Department and impressed colleagues with her professionalism. She was the kind of employee who carried herself with focus, but she also radiated charm and warmth. Yet Joyce wasn't defined only by work. She had a love of music, concerts, and fashion. Friends said she had presence, the kind of energy that made her stand out. She was striking to look at, and she carried herself with an air of confidence that made people notice when she entered a room. Her personal life revolved around relationships. In her early 20s, she met Martin Lister, and the two spent 3 years together. They went to concerts, traveled, and lived the kind of vibrant life young couples dream about. Martin remembered her years later as intelligent, adventurous, and full of life. Joyce also mingled with artists and musicians, moving through social circles that connected her to creative communities. She once attended the famous Nelson Mandela tribute concert in 1990, and rare footage shows her smiling in the crowd. Caught in a moment of celebration, she dreamed of being a singer and sometimes worked with people in the music world, hinting at ambitions that stretched beyond office life. But Joyce was also private, even secretive at times. She didn't always open up about struggles, and when relationships ended, she often severed ties completely. She had few long-term female friendships. To some, she seemed independent, but to others, it looked like she kept people at a distance. That distance grew wider as the years went on. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Joyce's life began to shift in ways no one fully understood. She left her job at Ernst & Young. At one point, she stayed at a women's refuge, which suggested she may have been escaping domestic violence. Her family ties weakened, friendships faded, and she seemed to drift between places, sometimes vanishing from people's lives without much explanation. Slowly, her connections to the outside world fell away. Eventually, Joyce moved into the Wood Green bedsit, where her life would end. The flat was small and isolated, with few neighbors close by. It was the kind of place where someone could live quietly and never be noticed, though she was in the heart of a bustling city. In that room, Joyce became invisible. At the same time, her health was becoming fragile. She suffered from asthma and a peptic ulcer, both of which could become dangerous without proper care. If her conditions worsened while she was alone, they might have been fatal. By December 2003, Joyce's isolation had reached its deepest point. That Christmas, she wrapped presents, though no one knows for whom. She set them neatly on the floor, a symbol of hope or tradition. Though the gifts would never be opened, she switched on the television, perhaps to fill the silence. Then, at some point in those cold December days, she died. The exact cause is still uncertain. It may have been an asthma attack, a complication from her ulcer, or something else entirely. But whatever happened, it was quiet, unnoticed, and final. For nearly 3 years, her body remained in that flat. The television continued to glow, the sound masking her absence. The unopened gifts gathered dust. The dishes stayed in the sink. The letters behind the door stacked higher and higher. Life outside went on, but inside that room, time had stopped. When officials finally entered in 2006, they were stunned by what they found. The scene looked frozen in time, almost staged. But it was not staged, it was real, and it was tragic. The coroner later confirmed there was no foul play, no evidence of violence, and no sign Joyce had taken her own life. She had simply slipped away. The story spread quickly. A woman dead 4 years, unnoticed, in London of all places. Neighbours said they assumed the flat was empty. Some thought the smell in the hallway was garbage. With the TV always on, no one questioned the constant noise. Her family and old friends had lost touch years before. Some assumed she had started a new life elsewhere. In a city of millions, Joyce had vanished without anyone realizing. After her death, journalists and filmmakers tried to reconstruct her life. Ads were placed in newspapers asking, "Did you know Joyce Vincent?" Slowly, memories surfaced. Former boyfriends spoke of her intelligence and charm. Colleagues recalled her professionalism. Friends described her elegance and her love of music. A former flatmate remembered her independence, but also her complicated relationships. Together, these fragments painted a fuller picture, showing that Joyce was more than the lonely figure in the headlines. She had been alive, vibrant, and full of ambition. She had once danced at concerts, dreamed of singing, and carried herself with grace. Her death was tragic, but her life had been meaningful. Still, her story became more than just her own. It became a symbol of something larger, the hidden loneliness in modern cities. London was crowded, busy, and full of people, yet in that environment, Joyce slipped away unnoticed. Her case revealed how easy it can be to lose connection, how silence can hide suffering, and how someone can disappear in plain sight. It is tempting to remember Joyce only for the way she died. But her life deserves more than that. She was not simply the woman found on a sofa after 3 years. She was the young woman who once laughed in the crowd at a Mandela concert, the one who charmed colleagues, who dreamed of a brighter life, and who once carried herself with elegance and ambition. Remembering her in this way gives her back the humanity the headlines stripped away. Her story leaves us with a lesson too. It asks us to look closer at the people around us, to check on neighbours and friends, to reach out to family we may not have spoken to in a while, because behind every closed door, there might be a story we don't know. Behind every silence, there might be someone who needs to be seen. Joyce Carol Vincent was more than a headline. She was a woman with dreams, charm, and ambition. The tragedy of her death will always be haunting, but the lesson of her life is powerful. She teaches us that connection matters, that attention matters, and that remembering one another matters. Even in a city of millions, no one should be invisible.